Hey there, here's a quick note before we begin. You can support the podcast by downloading, sharing, or checking with my favorite hiking gear at justhike.com. Let's hit the trail. Today on the Just Hyke Podcast, I'm delighted to welcome Donna Work, wildlife biologist with the Texas A&M Forest Service. With more than 30 years of experience managing forest health and wildlife habitat in the Pineywoods of East Texas, Donna has spent much of her career climbing into the canopies to study and protect the endangered red-cockaded woodpecker. She also coordinates the Forest Legacy Program, helping conserve working forests and training landowners in stewardship practices. Please join me in welcoming Donna Work. Welcome, Donna, to the Just Hyke Podcast. I'm really excited that you're here.
Thanks.
Why don't we start with, tell us a little bit about your background and what led to your life in wildlife biology.
Well, good. Well, ever since a kid, like a lot of kids, I loved animals. People thought, oh, you need to be a vet. You need to be a veterinarian, that sort of thing. And at the time, at least, I wasn't interested in the medical aspect of it. And I probably didn't have the smarts enough anyway to do it anyway. But I watched, you probably remember Jacques Cousteau.
Yes.
The sea explorer, deep sea explorer, things like that. I love that. So I was going to be a marine biologist. Okay, that's what I'm going to be, a marine biologist. Well, I had cousins who live in Corpus, and we'd go there every year or maybe every other year. Well, one year we went deep sea fishing. I was all so excited. Yay. And ate a huge meal ahead of time. Our aunt fed us well and ate a huge meal ahead of time and went out there deep sea fishing. I went up to the upper deck there and was just riding the front, kind of like the Titanic sort of thing.
Right.
It wasn't that big of a ship. Riding up front and just riding the waves. Said, oh, that's good. They started slowing down. And then I got to go downstairs and get my rod and reel. The second I hit that first floor, it hit me. And so I went to the bathroom. Anyway, I got sick and more sick. And I was able to hold the rod long enough to catch one fish, one king mackerel. And then I had to lay down the rest of the way.
Oh, no.
Oh, this can't be true. So we went the next year. And I didn't eat that much, and I stayed in the air-conditioned cabin and mother tried to keep my mind off of it by playing card games and stuff. Well, I just got sick quicker and didn't catch anything. So I thought I could probably be a marine biologist without having to go to sea, but I thought, well, I'll just stick on land. So again, my interest was in animals. After I graduated high school and went to college, I didn't know what to major in, but I liked biology. So I majored in biology at Tarleton State. And while I was there, not thinking, I saw a catalog that my roommate had to A&M. I just started thumbing through it, and I saw wildlife and fishery science. I said, that's what I want. So I transferred and got into wildlife there. So that's kind of
awesome.
how I got into that. Didn't get a wildlife job right away, but when I got my job here, I just needed a degree in natural resources, and that's what wildlife was, a degree in natural resources. And eventually I learned the forestry on the job and finally got to actually work with wildlife with the red-cockaded woodpecker, and the rest is history.
Nice. So how long have you been with the Texas Forest Service?
I've been here 35 years. In year 35, right?
Do you plan to retire?
Ever? I hope so. I haven't put pen to paper yet, but at least maybe a couple more years. I still like what I do. And there's a program I've been working on that I want to maybe a little bit longer before I go. But eventually, because there's other things I'd like to do too besides work.
So where are you stationed out of? Are you in
I'm
Lufkin?
in Lufkin, right, in Lufkin. Our
Okay.
office is in Hudson, which is kind of a suburb of Lufkin, but that's where I am, in Lufkin.
Okay. And then, so tell me about the red-cockaded woodpecker program.
Okay.
And because I know you've been instrumental in that program, especially over at W.G. Jones Forest here on 1488. And so
Right.
tell me just how all that came about and your involvement and what you have done.
Okay. I started working with the red-cockaded woodpecker in 96. I was already on working with forest insect pest research with the Texas A&M Forest Service, and the guy who managed the then endangered red-cockaded woodpeckers on two of our state forests, the W.G. Jones State Forest in Conroe and the I.D. Fairchild State Forest in between Rusk and Palestine. He retired, so they needed somebody to manage them. Since it was an endangered, now threatened species, we need to follow the proper protocols and habitat management and that sort of thing. So they asked me, since I had the wildlife degree, would I like to add that to my job duties? I said, yes, that's real wildlife instead of the six-legged insects, although they were cool. Part of my job in managing them is monitoring to make sure they have the right habitat and work with our district foresters on each of those 2 state forests. And when it's time to do some sort of forest management or prescribed burning or whatever, they consult with me and say, can we do this time of year? And what do we need to meet the needs of the red-cockaded woodpeckers? And then when I first started, none of our red-cockaded woodpeckers were banded. So when I went to the first woodpecker meeting of my woodpecker career, they said, well, why don't we all get together and capture and band the woodpeckers on the 2 state forests? So we'll have a baseline there of banded birds. And then if we do what we do in the future, monitoring or translocation, moving birds from one population to another to beef up populations and enhance the gene pool, then we'll already have banded birds. So biologists from Parks and Wildlife, Fish and Wildlife Service, some of the timber industries, and others got together. They already had banding permits, and we all got together and in a few days got all the birds on both forests banded.
So wow, that's
kind
exciting.
of how I got started and into that. So now part of what I do to manage for them is to band the birds myself. I haven't in the last 2 years. Last year was because of knee issues, and this year was because of the trees that the birds nested in. They weren't very accessible. They were 50 to 60 feet high and in very crooked trees. And I said, at this point in my career, I'm not going to do that. So, but still, it includes monitoring them, counting the numbers, and banding when I can.
So are you like one of the few people who can go up and band a bird that's on the
With our agents.
threatened list?
Yes. I am teaching a couple other people how to do the climbing. So if I can't climb in the future, they can climb, and I've still with me there under supervision with my permits. And then I can do everything else. I can do the banding, I can do the monitoring. But with our agency, I'm the only one that does that now.
Right.
But there are people, I'm just a drop in the bucket here in East Texas. Most of the people that do this are on the national forests, our 4 national forests, although they've cut back now on how many biologists they have, but they also have other specialists that can go up there and do that. Some other private folks who work in environmental consulting and things like that, they have permits and they do it here in Texas, East Texas, and other places. So there's others a lot more than me that do a lot more than I do in our 2 little state forests.
What do you think some of the biggest challenges and successes are with the project?
The challenges are because of limited resources, people-wise and monetary-wise, getting all the habitat done that we need on the state forests. It's a little easier now that we have some of the larger equipment, the mulching machines that we use to kind of chop down the mid-story to keep it down and manageable so it doesn't grow so high and thick in there that the woodpeckers leave. So just the personnel and the machinery and the time to do that management. Although we find ways. We can use our own equipment. There's grants to be gotten where we can pay for artificial cavities that can be installed in these trees. By artificial cavities, I mean it's cavities that are man-made, but that you can go up with a chainsaw and cut a rectangle out of the tree and slide in one of these. It looks like a little bluebird box.
Oh, yeah.
Insert, they call it, and put those in, and that makes ready-made homes for them real quickly. So those are the challenges, just getting the money and the personnel and the time and the abilities to do that. So that's a challenge. But some of the successes is we've got some of that done. In fact, Eagle Scout candidates, I've worked with them a lot on the Jones State Forest.
Oh, nice.
And usually if they pick something for their Eagle Scout project and they're working with an endangered or threatened species, that always gets accepted. So they go out and they love their hatchets and bow saws and things like that, and go out there and they will cut down some of that if they grow up next to the red-cockaded woodpecker cavity trees that they roost in at night and nest in during nesting season, then the birds don't feel safe. And it also, if it grows up big and thick, they're more prone to have predators that can get into their cavities, and also makes it more adding fuel to, if there's a wildfire, it could damage the trees that they live in. So Eagle Scouts are a good way to do that. So you find other ways to do the habitat work. And so some of those successes, we've done that with getting grants to get more cavity trees. There is a years ago, there was a mitigation project for when they widened 1488. One time we got some monies to do some of that habitat work with that.
Oh, good.
And so other avenues to do that. So those are some successes. And then having banded a lot of the birds there, and other successes are, since we banned the birds, we're a small population that needs help because of genetic issues and things like that. We've been able to 3 times translocate birds. That means take them from an unrelated population, bring them into our population with like 2 unrelated birds, and put them in their own place, have their own territory, and hopefully they meet, fall in love, and stay where they are, and enhance our gene pool, plus enlarge our population. So we've been able to do that 3 times on the Jones State Forest, twice from the Kisatchie National Forest and that area over there in Louisiana, and once from the Sam Houston National Forest. And 1 time on the Fairchild State Forest have we done it with Louisiana birds.
Wow,
So
that's awesome.
Cajun blood on our forests.
Very cool. Now, what is the importance of moving from endangered to threatened? Like, how does that affect? Like, I always thought it was kind of good for us, like for W.G. Jones Forest, to have an endangered species right there, because that'll, in my mind, it's like, well, maybe that'll protect our forest and they can't tear it down and build. That kind of thing.
They're still protected when they're downlisted to threatened, but the endangered part, it's just a different type of, depending on the species, it's a different type of protection that they have. Having an endangered species, yes, that may help a little bit as far as people trying to, and it's happened before, trying to buy the forest and develop it and things like that. Since it is a listed species, and especially an endangered species, if they try to do that, there's a lot of mitigation they have to go through that usually makes it not worth it. Because, okay, if you take this habitat and these birds, if there's a family group of birds in the way of what you want to do, you're going to have to go through all this management on another place and pay a consultant or somebody to move birds from one place to another if it has the right habitat and that sort of thing. So that makes it a little hard for them. Threatened species, again, depending on the species needs. With this one, it sounds like the protections that it has and the management activities we're supposed to do are very close to the same that we have with under endangered. But with threatened species, that there can be stipulations on a species by species basis on what protections they have. There's a little more leniency, like in the forestry community. If it's a threatened species, we can do a little bit more habitat work that falls in line with our normal forest management. With the birds, we have a little more leniency, but we still can't cut down all the birds' habitat. We still can't kill the birds or anything like that. So they're still protected. Good. Yeah. And what the Fish and Wildlife Service every 5 years picks several species, whether it's plants or animals or birds, reptiles, mammals, mollusks, or whatever. They look at several species for a period of at least 5 years, and they go through and look at the current science and the current population numbers, and the managers, they'll like in our case with the woodpecker, they interview the land managers that say, if we downlist this bird from endangered to threatened, or even take it totally off the list, which is delisting, how will you manage these birds? And we, along with a lot of other managers of red-cockaded woodpeckers, said we're going to manage them the same way. So having that information and the population numbers, their population numbers have gone up enough across their range. And the commitments of the land managers was enough for them to propose they be downlisted to threatened. And that's what happened at the end of last year. They always have public input, and they look at scientific evidence of what's going on with that. And then that's when they make that decision to downlist it.
Well, and that's a credit to your hard work, like over the years, having a critter go from endangered to threatened, like that's a step in the right direction. So I'm really happy about that. Yes. I remember when I was part of the Heartwood chapter of the Texas Master Naturalist Group, and we were located over at W.G. Jones Forest, and I think I remember some of the volunteers going and assisting with some of the banding projects that you were doing. And so is there an opportunity for volunteers, like adult volunteers other than Eagle Scouts, to get involved with the Red-cockaded Woodpecker project? Or what would be the avenue for people for that?
Yeah, they can contact me directly. How the master naturalists before and other people that are birders or interested parties, how they've helped before is whenever I'm climbing, if I'm climbing and banding, whatever, I'm not supposed to do that alone. So I need a
Yeah.
ground crew to help hand me ladders. And if I'm banding birds, I lower the bag down that has the baby birds in it to keep them safe until I can climb down and go there. All this is done under my supervision. So that's mainly how they could help, just get directly with me. And even if there's other people to help, some people, if they're just really interested and want to be involved with it, they can still come along too. I like to show
Nice.
people and let them get to see that. And even some master naturalists have helped chip in the first time we were going to move birds. They chipped in and helped do some of that by hand, some of that managing the brush and things that are in the mid-story there in an area where we wanted to move the birds into. It was an area that was inactive, means the woodpeckers weren't using it at the time, but we put in some of those artificial cavities, and that's one of the places we planned on moving the birds to. And we found out all this about August. And so I said, wow, we need to do something with this habitat before we move the birds in October. And so bless their hearts, they worked hard and out there in the heat. And I said, y'all have to stop and make y'all stop at noon because it's too hot. But they did a great job, just like the Boy Scouts with
Handsaws and lopping.
And loppers. Yep, loppers a lot. So they help to do that. So as far as volunteering for that, it's usually something I have to be around for too, but they can help me out in carrying equipment or photographing or that sort of thing. And if there's birders out there that are out there during non-nesting season, if they see birds and if they take a photograph and a lot of these folks have a lot of good zoom lenses, if they zoom in and they can see band colors on the birds or whatever, I love to get those type of photos and look at the band colors and combinations, and I can figure out where the bird was hatched, when it was hatched, and what family it came from, or if it came from somewhere off our forest.
What a great idea.
So if somebody has photos like that, they don't have to have a permit to go out there and photograph birds when it's not nesting season and not disturbing the birds. And that gives me a lot of information because I don't live there and I can't be there enough to watch all the birds and have the spotting scopes and binoculars to see where everybody is. So I get a lot of help from birders that do that.
Oh, such a great idea. And they would want to know location too, or you would want to know.
Yeah, I would want to know location.
Where did you take this picture?
Describe it or put a pin on a map or something like that.
Yeah.
I would want to know where it is and see if it's still in its family group or not, or shifted somewhere on the forest. They tend to shift around a little bit, but.
Now, just out of curiosity, like some birds, they mate for life, right? Like they get a pair together and they mate for life. Is that the same thing with the red-cockaded woodpecker, or do they like
a little bit? Yeah, they pretty much do. And each family group has its own territory. And ideally you have a breeding male and a breeding female and a helper bird or two. And those helper birds are usually male offsprings of previous year's hatches. And they stick around. They help to defend the territory. They're pretty territorial. They help to incubate the eggs when there's eggs in the nest. They help to feed the young when there's young. And then if something happens to that male, then one of these other helper birds could take up the top breeding spot, find their own female, not mom, but find their own female and keep the family going. Or if we lose a female, or if she dies or something like that, if another female comes by and is attracted there, or if we move an unrelated female from another place and move it into that population, and they can take up together and they can breed and nest and everything too. So yeah, they kind of stay for life, but if something happens to one or the other, they will take another male.
Gotcha.
They'll take another, well, if it's the male, he'll take another female. If the male dies again, if there's a helper bird to take over the top breeding spot, he'll stay there. So she'll try to find her another male somewhere else.
Okay. So that's why they would move around too, possibly.
Yeah, if something happens to one of them.
So let's talk a little bit about adventures and field life, working in the field, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite or most memorable moments from working in the field? Like, I imagine like climbing up 50-foot ladders in the trees.
I'm afraid of heights. So
oh goodness,
just accomplishing that. So that gets kind of scary at times.
Yeah.
But when I first started working, we were doing even before the woodpeckers, we were doing bark beetle research, and we'd put out traps to take beetle counts and test some lures and things like that. So when I first started working, my boss said, "How good are you at climbing fire towers?"
Yeah.
What? Yeah. And my eyes got big. And during the spring of the year, they would get on a couple different fire towers in East Texas and put traps, beetle traps at different levels. And fortunately, the fire towers have angled ladders, little platforms, every section that you go up. It's not like climbing straight up a water tower or something like that.
Switchbacks.
Yeah, switchbacks and rails and stuff like
Nice.
that. So that, I got used to that. I would find out like the next day, the calves of my legs would really tell me, you've been climbing, and that you haven't been climbing in a while, haven't you? So doing that, but getting over that fear of height, even though still a fear of heights, but that was a safe way to do it. Climbing the trees, I have ladders and a harness and a belt that goes around the tree that I can climb up. Gets kind of scary at first. I got used to it. I did 60 feet one time.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I will never do that again. And I did. And I've done some 50s, but I've done a lot of 40s and 30s. And sometimes we put the artificial cavities down at 20 if the habitat's good enough. So it's not so bad now because I know my equipment. I know what I can do. But when I first started the climbing, it was before I even worked with the woodpeckers, but while we were doing the insect research, and the guys on the ground that were teaching me how to climb, had one ladder and climb up it a little ways, chain off that ladder at 10 foot, and then go up a little bit higher and and I pull up a rope with the second and the third ladder on those. And at one point there, either the second or probably the third ladder, when they kind of connect together on top. So when I slid the third ladder on top of the prongs of the second ladder, the ladder is kind of hanging out in space. If a tree, y'all can't always see, but if it's leaning one way or the other or whatever, it's kind of hanging out in space. I said, what do I do with that? He said, that's okay. When you get up that high and you get your foot on that first rung of that ladder, it'll slam against the tree. It'll say slam while I'm up here. Well, that was kind of scary, but then I learned how to deal with that and deal with other slightly crooked trees. So that's kind of part of it.
I mean, that must have been so, like, good for you for pushing through those fears, because so
Right.
many times, like, our fears, something like that can stop us from doing the things that we really want to do. So I just want to take a minute to commend you for pushing
thank
through.
you.
And any other memorable moments you want to share?
One is, some memorable moments I have are out in the field, is like if people come along, like people hiking or birding or something like that, they come along and I'm working, I like to show them what I'm doing and give them an opportunity to see what I'm doing. And I like being able to do that. But as far as working in the field itself, one of my most memorable moments, and it took place a few years ago, and I was asked to help plant some aquatic plants around Lake Conroe. There's another lady that worked with us. She had previously been with AgriLife, and she was part of it. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bass Club, and others were part of it. They had a lot of these aquatic plants, grasses and other type of plants that we'd go out and plant them at certain places on the bank. On the banks, or actually in the water. The boat I went on, one of these big air boats, and the boat I went on, we actually planted a species that needed to be totally submerged and put it down in the water. And I love water, and it was summertime, so I just got in that water, and I'd have to go down. I didn't have to get my head in the water, but I could go down and reach and get the plant in there and put the roots, get the roots covered up and come back up. So that was one of the funnest days I've had.
Oh, nice.
So that
Very
was a fun,
cool.
memorable moment for me.
Yeah.
Another one, scary, funny, or surprising moment.
Sure. Yeah.
With that.
Whichever. Go wherever you want to go.
Oh, yeah, because I can't remember what part of that is, where it says scary, which is the climbing, funny or surprising moment in the forest. One of those funny and surprising moments were one of the predators of the red-cockaded woodpecker are flying squirrels. They're
Oh,
cute,
really?
soft, neat little critters, but they are also cavity dwellers. So the woodpeckers themselves, the red-cockaded woodpecker is different from other woodpeckers in that they construct the cavity they roost in at night, and that they nest in live pine trees. So it takes them a year, 2 or 3 or more years to build a cavity. Other cavity dwellers like to take those over sometimes, ready-made home, And so sometimes the flying squirrels will get into the red-cockaded woodpecker's cavity tree. And so protocol calls for us to go up there and extract them and leave it open for the red-cockaded woodpeckers. I had different methods of doing that, and there's a few different methods, but what I started off with before I got the vacuum cleaner, that's another adventure. is
I think I remember some stories about the vacuum cleaner.
Yeah. So going up there with the flying squirrels, I would go up there, and I knew they were there. I have a peeper scope where I can peek inside before I go up there. I knew they were there. So I climb up there, try to be as quiet as I can with aluminum ladders, go up there. And once I get up there, I take a glove or something or a rag and stuff it in the hole. And then I have to get in position where I'm standing on the ladder. My belts are on the tree. I've got the harness on. If I lean back, that all holds me up, and I've got two hands. Well, then when I've got a little kind of a long tube that's wire that I can scare them into and put that little tube up in there. And if I miss the birds, I also have these little grabbers I can grab them with. Well, sometimes once I get up there, if they don't get into the little trap or if my grabbers don't catch them right away, they come out on their own.
Uh-oh.
I miss a lot of them. So one time the squirrel came out and he got away and said, "Oh man, I missed it." The guy with me, he said, "The squirrel is on the other side of the tree, just 2 inches above where your belt is. This is almost impossible, but I've got one chance." I leaned forward, held onto the rungs. One chance I went like this with his description. I went back there and grabbed the thing. Of course, in a leather glove, and grabbed it and said, "Oh my goodness." And then I have a little trap, but I have a cage I put them in, and then I go relocate them somewhere else in a similar type habitat. And then on another occasion, the squirrel got away and it landed. I've always expected them to just like come out in my face. But
that's what I was, that would come straight out to your face.
It got close, but it went and it landed, it stopped on my boot. So again, I think I've got one shot at this. So again, I held onto the rungs and with one hand reached down there and grab it off my boot. That was to me, it was funny, but also amazing that even happened.
If you're enjoying this episode of Just Hyke, here's how you can help support the show. First, be sure to follow, download, and share this episode. It helps more adventurers like you and me discover the podcast and helps keep this journey going strong. And if you're gearing up for your next hike or just curious about my favorite outdoor gear, be sure to check out my Amazon affiliate page. I've listed all the items I actually use, from hiking shoes to trail snacks. You'll find them at justhyke.com. Every purchase through the link helps support the podcast at no extra cost to you. Thanks again for being here with me on the trail. Let's go back to our show. What does a typical day in your work look like?
I've always worked with, well, not always, but I've worked for a long time with 2 or sometimes 3 different projects, different departments. So part of my work is with our water resources program. And we work with loggers and landowners and talk to them about using good, sound logging practices that protect soil and water during the operations and after the operations. So I do sometimes logger trainings with that. I sometimes do presentations at the logger trainings and take them out in the field and see some of these practices implemented on the ground. But also I talk to civic groups about the same thing and forest landowners, because even if they're not doing the actual logging or forestry project, they still are on the land and they need to make sure these practices are done there. Some of it is working with that. Some of it is writing newsletter articles. Some of it, like very recently, is planning forest landowner workshops and meetings that the Texas Forestry Association and the Sustainable Forestry Initiative Committee of Texas Forestry Association sponsor. And we put together day-long workshops that cover topics that are of interest to forest landowners, or bring them all together. And especially if there's an area where they don't have a landowner association, or if the landowner association needs a boost in membership or something, we get folks from all over to come help with that. So I just recently had one of those in Silsbee, November 7th. So I do that with the red-cockaded woodpecker during middle of March. April, May is heavy to those. I work with Forest Legacy, which is basically a conservation easement program that is part of the U.S. Forest Service, but the states enact it in each state. And so doing all sorts of activities with that, whether it's monitoring sites or doing paperwork. There's always annual reports on those and a whole host of other things. So
busy.
Some days are in the office a lot, some are out in the field a lot, some are long days. So I could be doing any of that just about at any time.
So you mentioned the red-cockaded woodpecker again, and it made me think of something. Sometimes when I'm on the hiking trail at W.G. Jones in particular, certain sections of the trail will be closed off. So we can safely blame you for saying, hey, you guys need to close the trails off. And for what
Actually,
reason is that?
our district forester, I don't know if the current district forester does that or not, but our former district forester there, John Warner, really wanted to make sure that the birds weren't disturbed during this time, which is a good thing. And so he would put up barricades on certain parts that would lead people right through. On the south side, they may put up a few there too, but it's just temporarily during
Yes.
their
Yes.
breeding and nesting period to keep a lot of traffic and activity going on through there. Some people ride mountain bikes, some people hike, some people walk dogs and things like that. And so we're just trying to keep the activity down. A lot of the birders, they have like huge lenses and spotting scopes. Even from behind those barriers, they can get a good peek and good see. But yeah,
Right.
the barricades that are up there, that just means, hey, there's other parts of the trail, there are plenty to go on the north and south side, but just kind of blocking off the area where they're doing the nesting and the breeding.
Yes. I didn't mean to say blame you for it,
I know,
but
yes. No, that's
in a
okay.
negative sense, it's
I'll take
like
it.
just creating an understanding and an awareness that,
Right.
those barricades are put up for a reason, and we want to
Right.
help protect the red-cockaded woodpecker, and we want to respect their space.
Just during that nesting season.
Yeah. Which is,
You can blame me.
really nice hiking season too. So let's move into women in conservation. What has it been like to build a career as a woman in the field of wildlife biology? Have you, like, early on, was it a mostly male dominated industry, or did you ever feel any of that?
Early,
Or is it still
male or female in wildlife, especially early on, there were more people wanting to do it than there were jobs. So
right?
for anybody, it was kind of hard to get a good job and get a foothold into it.
Sure.
Now there's more opportunities, not just with state agencies, but in industry folks and with large private landowners and people working on their own as private consultants. There were more males in it, but there were other females too, even in forestry and wildlife when I first came about. I never felt like there was a problem or issue with it. And now there are more females as foresters, but also as wildlife biologists, and still a lot of males, but I never felt like it was that we were discriminated against or anything like that. It's just a hard field to get into anyway, just because of a lot of people want to do it and may not realize what all is involved with it, but also it's just harder to get into, not as many jobs as people who want to do them. But there's more opportunities and different opportunities now.
Good. Good. What advice would you give a young woman or students who dream of working in outdoors and conservation?
I would just urge them to kind of research what opportunities are out there and what the jobs actually entail. Talk with professionals who are already doing that. It may not be, I'll skip through the woods with Bambi. There's a lot more to it than that. And some people will get into wildlife, but also forestry because, well, I don't like to work with people. Actually, working with people is a big component of especially forestry, but also with wildlife, because you need to be able to explain what needs to be done. You need to work with landowners that have the property and what they need to do to enhance the wildlife habitat on their property. So I would have them research the different types of jobs that they can find in wildlife and talk to the professionals and see what they actually do on the ground where they can with an internship or even volunteering. See if you can go out with someone to kind of shadow them and see what it's really like out in the field. And even if they say, well, college is not for me, there's opportunities for high school graduates as well. While they're in high school or while they're in college, look at taking the coursework that kind of leads toward this. Like, I liked biology anyway, so in high school I took extra biology when I could. When I started off at Tarleton State, of course, I had to take your basics, but I loved microbiology. That was one of the funnest courses I ever took, but I could not see myself sitting in a lab with a microscope and no windows. There's other things you can do with microbiology, I know. But I loved that course, but taking that plus animal anatomy and physiology and all the ologies like mammalogy and ichthyology and ornithology, that sort of thing. So just looking at those courses and seeing what they can do. And if they're still gung-ho about it, again, getting in those volunteer hours or those internships where they actually get hands-on experience to see if this is really what they want to do, or they already have some sort of knowledge and some sort of base to work with.
And you can start to create some contacts in the industry, getting to
Right.
know you and you getting to know them, kind of thing. Yeah.
And I would say be outgoing. I don't mean to a fault or a pest, but be outgoing. I say that because I'm painfully shy as a kid, and even in high school and college. I love where I am now, but I would have probably been able to accomplish more sooner by being more outgoing and being willing to go out. I don't mean just step out of your comfort zone. You don't have to be someone you're not. Be the person that
Right.
you are,
Yeah.
always are. And
Yeah.
I know some quiet, shy people, but they stepped out and they found those opportunities out there and they went for it. And I'm not the one to ask. I would just say, still be yourself, but kind of get out of your comfort zone and you can see more.
That's great advice. So often it's those, it goes back to, your fear of heights, right?
Mhm.
And just stepping outside of that fear or stepping into that fear, let's say, and moving forward one step at a time, even though it does, give you a little bit of a fright, right?
And then you learn more, you grow more. Like I grew more as a professional throughout this whole process. And now, at a drop of a hat, I can give a presentation on something or give a little talk on something that I know and understand without having tons of preparation and get stage fright. So I'm much better at that. So I'm more outgoing and just have grown personally that way and professionally that way, being able to step out and do things that I never thought I would do or haven't done before.
Now, spending so much time among the trees and wildlife, how has nature shaped the outlook on life or balance?
Just besides the beauty, there's a lot of beauty here in East Texas, but other places that I go to, just being out there, I'm intrigued by when you're out there and walking amongst it, and if you take time to smell the roses, so to say, and look
Right.
at and just look at the intricacy of like a multi-layered flower or something like that, just seeing that sort of thing, and the way the animals are adapted to live where they are and how the whole ecosystem works together. And every part of it, the plants, the trees, the animals, the rainfall, the sunlight, and everything is there doing its job, what God made them to be, what God made them to do. And it all works together. And it's just amazing to me how some of these things, how could this just happen? It doesn't just happen. So that's always amazes me, just the wonders of nature and the intricacies of it and the beauty of it, and even some of the danger. And you think that's not a good thing, it can actually be beautiful in its own way.
Very
Whether it's
cool.
animals or whether it's plants or whatever, it's just out there and a part of the whole system.
I think we need to keep our habitats, right, as much as we can. I understand that we need houses and places to live, but we also need the forests for us to go out and get some peace and some calm and get away from the city.
It's health benefits for us too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Being able to use what's out there
Yes.
and just do it in the right way, and it benefits all of us. So.
What do you wish more people understood about forests for support for both wildlife and human communities?
Here in East Texas and being a part of the forestry community, a lot of people don't understand why the forest community does what they do. So I wish people would understand that there's always bad things that happen and accidents that happen and bad apples that don't want to do the right thing. But there's a lot of good going on out there. We do the forest management in ways, and that's part of our water resources program, doing the forest management in ways that, yes, we can utilize the trees out there. We harvest the trees. They're planted for this purpose. It's a tree farm in many instances. And when we harvest the trees and do it in the right way, it shouldn't affect, or at least minimally affect, the water quality. And we work hard to keep the sediment out of the stream and keep trees along the stream where it can shade the stream for the critters that live in the water. And also that streamside management zone, we call it in forestry, but a little layer of vegetation that helps to act as a sponge. That spongy forest floor will help to slow down water and trap pollutants and let pollutants filter out and water sink into the ground. And if any water gets to the stream, it's already been filtered out. It's cleaner than it would be if there was just bare ground along there. So when we do the forest management and send logs to the mill and make wood products that we all use every day, whether it's houses and pens and pencils or toilet paper or paper towels or wood for furniture and things like that, we use those every day. But if it's true forestry, after we harvest, we do a preparation of the site and plant more trees back. So on the landscape, we have trees of all ages and all sizes growing. And at every point in there, it's a benefit to some sort of wildlife, even an open area. We call it total harvest or a clear cut in an open area. Yeah, I see deer out there foraging and looking for food out there, but they have cover nearby in the streamside management zone or the forest that's next to it and things like that. And then even at the small stage where the seedlings are out there and the young saplings, those planted in a row, those plantations, at each stage, some sort of form of wildlife can still use that. And when we do the forest management, especially if the landowner is really heavy into wildlife management, they can do extra things to make sure there's extra wildlife habitat out there, whether along the streams or any bare roads that can reseed with a good wildlife friendly mix that helps hold the soil in place, but it also can benefit wildlife by being like a food plot or something. So just seeing one ugly area, that just think of the whole system, and that we're always replanting and having trees out there doing all the good things, cleaning the air and protecting the water and providing wildlife habitat and food for wildlife, food for us, and that sort of thing.
Do you think that, like the complaint line, let's say, do you think that's your biggest complaint is like when a cut happens or whatever, cut
Total
a forest?
harvest,
Thank you.
total harvest, because sometimes we harvest and it's only some of the trees.
So do you think that's like one of the biggest complaints that you get, or
Probably.
calls? You
Yeah,
know, a
probably
harvest
discuss
has been done, and then people are like, "What are you guys doing cutting down the
ugly.
forest?"
Yeah,
Right?
we don't get a lot of calls like that, but we do get, I'm sure people do get that, but that's probably the biggest thing I hear. That is so ugly. Look what they did. And if it's on a national forest, they really flip out.
Yes.
But the national forests go above and beyond the protections that we talk about for soil and water, and they don't harvest near as much as the actual tree farms and those folks do. But also doing that forest management, even with the red-cockaded woodpecker, sometimes to thin out some of the trees. Sometimes we have to do the mulching or the prescribed burning, which is healthy for any forest, unless there's too much of a fuel load and it burns more than it should. But then there's other methods that you can use there. Even the thinning out of the stands where they're not so dense, still leaving enough habitat for the birds, keeping the mid-story down like we talked about before.
Yes.
We're not just managing for one species, and we're managing for a multitude of species. So there's a lot of rare plants and other animals that like that same type of habitat. The prescribed burning helps keep it down. Even the mulching, even the thinning of the trees, keep that habitat in the way that the woodpeckers need it, but a lot of other species, plants and animals, need that same sort of habitat. So it's not just managing for one species or one species of animal or one species of tree or whatever, but it's any good forest management can help manage a host of species.
Nice. Now, speaking of different species, let's just take a moment to talk about the wild hogs that we got out in the forests.
Right.
Have you ever had any issues, like, because you're in the forest quite a bit, do you ever run into any troubles with the wild hogs, and what kind of precautions should, hikers take if they ever see a hog on the trail?
I have come across groups of the wild hogs several times. The big thing is the damage that they do rooting around and things like that. It's a species that was brought over here and released and has gone crazy. So it's okay to harvest those when we can, or trap them and get rid of them, because they're not a native to our place. In fact, they're a species that does more damage. But as far as danger to people, there's always a danger with wildlife, and especially if you get between a mother animal and her young, or the sow and the young, you don't want to do that. For 100% of the time I've come across them, we may startle each other. I'll hear a hog, or I'll walk across the way, or we startle each other and they go off somewhere. They usually startle and go off somewhere. Or if we're driving down the road, in the little woods road, dirt road, we'll see them come across the road and we just stop and let them go on by. But even walking out in the woods, just don't try to approach them or grab them or anything like that. If you see some babies, of course, leave those alone. But for the most part, if they hear you or see you, they get scared and run the other way. So
Gotcha.
let them do their thing.
Yeah.
And go the other way as well. So.
Yeah. And that's been my experience as well. So as you look toward the future, what parts of your career are you most proud of?
One thing that really touched me and I felt really honored was, I had to write this down so I remember the whole name of it, but I received the 2023 Vice Chancellor's Award in Excellence for Public Service in Forestry by the Texas A&M AgriLife.
Ah, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Texas A&M Forest Service has always been under the A&M umbrella. Then several years ago, A&M decided they wanted to brand all their entities with the A&M name. So now our Texas A&M Forest Service, still a state agency, but under the A&M umbrella. So that's why AgriLife sponsors that award. And just to know that I was nominated by my supervisor and other people that I've worked with, other supervisors and other people that I work with contributed to that application really made me feel good. So just being able to get that type of award, and other people, of course, have gotten it after me, and there's other versions of it, award in excellence for other entities like in agriculture and stuff. But when it said public service and forestry, I said, wow, that's cool, because I like serving the public and serving people and doing it in forestry, which wasn't my major, but I learned a lot of forestry on the job. So that really meant a whole lot to me. So I've liked that. But I've already told you about the personal growth and working in the field and working with the public and public speaking. And I'm not proud of that, but I'm thankful for that. That helps me to grow as a person. And once in a while, I've had, like, if I've talked to college students at a career fair, or if they've seen me and my work here, and volunteers or interns that have come through and maybe worked a little while with me, some of them said, well, I went to work with the Forest Service, or I want to stay in this career field because of what you've shown me and what you've done, and things like that. So that makes you feel good.
That's awesome. So are there any projects or goals that you still hope to be carried forward in W.G. Jones or anywhere else?
Okay. Yeah. On the Jones, and I know they will just continue with the woodpecker management, and they do a lot of education on the W.G. Jones State Forest. They're utilized a lot. So we're kind of like an urban forest. It's just like an L-shaped forest in the middle of urbanization development all around us. So the chance to have kids and adults come out to a place where they can be in nature, do the hiking, like you said. And they have programs for students that they can go out there and learn about the natural world and learn about trees, but also it helps them to learn about other school subjects by using the trees or the natural world. So I hope they will keep that up, and I'm sure they will. Any other projects I think would just be like ongoing for the woodpecker and helping those populations to thrive and to grow on that limited amount of acreage right there, but still educate the public.
It's such a gem having the forest right there. Yeah. So if you could take us on a short walk, like if you were going to take somebody on a walk and show them some hidden gems or maybe some of your favorite spots, if you're willing to share this information.
Oh, yeah, I like it. Yeah.
If you're willing to share, where would you, like at W.G. Jones, where would you take somebody? And then any other forest in the area, what would you show someone?
Okay. On the W.G. Jones, I would take them to one of the red-cockaded woodpecker clusters. That cluster is where they have their cavity trees and the typical. We didn't go into all of that with the woodpecker. But I take them to one of those so they can see an active tree, hopefully hear a bird, but they're not always, they don't hang out there all day. In the mornings, they go off foraging for food, who knows where. If they hear or see a bird, that's top notch, but I want them to see at least the trees and what they look like in the natural state. And then maybe you've been down to the Sweetleaf Nature Trail.
That's my favorite trail.
That's cool because it's got a creek, and I love water. So it's got a creek, and there's some signs out there that may tell you species and stuff if they're still out there. I'm not sure. But there's also a swinging bridge out there. So it's kind of a cool thing.
Yes. Yeah, I remember when that bridge, that swinging bridge or the suspension bridge, when it was rainbow planks. Do you remember the rainbow planks? Yes, they were
painted, right. And then one of the big heavy storms and floods tore that up. So they had to fix that. But yeah,
fix that. I always called it the Rainbow Bridge.
So us dog people, that means something else.
Right.
But it was very cool. Each plank was colored. And
very nice. Let's see. And so just for fun, let's wrap it up. What's your favorite way to relax and connect with nature outside of work?
Okay. I love dogs and working with dogs. So just going out in nature and being able to hike with my dogs on a trail, or that's one way I can be with nature, but also with my dogs. And my breed of choice are labs, and I've got labs and lab mixes. They love to get in the water, and I love water too. So just seeing them enjoy the runs, and if we're in an area where they can go loose, or getting in the creeks and swimming in the creeks and fetching balls in the creeks. That's one thing that I really like to do with my dogs. Also competing in dog sports. So right now I've been doing dock diving with one of my dogs. In the past, I've done dog agility for like 20 plus years, did dog agility and a little bit of competitive obedience. So having fun with my dogs and seeing them have fun mainly, I really like that. So it may or may not be relaxing, except when we're walking in the woods, but to me, it's fun.
Very nice.
But it'll be outside.
Yes. Good. So if anybody wanted to get a hold of you, is it okay if we include your email or contact information? We'll do that in the show notes. But if you just want to say what it is right now.
My email here at work is DWORK tfs.tamu.edu. My phone number at my desk is 936-639-8191.
I'll put that in our show notes so that people can click on it if they need to. Thank you so much, Donna. I appreciate you being on this interview with me. Is there anything else you wanted to add or share, or do you think we covered it?
I think we covered it. Just get out and enjoy where you can and get with other people. Trees have shown to have been a real medical help and a mental help to folks when they're exposed to even just seeing them out a hospital window and things like that.
Read that study. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I think it's called the hospital window study.
Oh,
something.
really? Okay.
Yeah, it's very plainly named.
Right.
But yes, so just to reference that study just a little bit, from what I understand is, since we brought it up, so there's a study with a hospital window that was looking out over at a green space, and then another study where the patients were looking over a parking lot, and it was shown that the patients who had the green space to look at, healed faster and better than the ones who were looking outside of a parking lot. And so it's just very interesting, and it's super important for us to have that green space out there.